Thank you, Madam President. You know, 50 years ago, President Lyndon Johnson returned to the old elementary school he had once attended, and with him he had a major piece of legislation. At a picnic table on the lawn of the school, President Johnson signed into law the Elementary and Secondary Education Act, or ESEA. He said with this law he envisioned, quote, full educational opportunity as our first national goal. Our nation has always held the ideal of education for all, but in 1965, ESA put that idea into action. It aimed to close the education gaps between rich and poor, black and white, kids from rural areas, and kids from big cities. And in doing so, ESEA took a step forward for civil rights. Today, Madam President, we have a chance to reauthorize that civil rights law to continue what President Johnson called our first national goal. We have the chance to finally move away from the No Child Left Behind Act. And we have the chance to send the Every Student Succeeds Act to the President's desk to help ensure all kids have access to a quality education regardless of where they live or how they learn or how much money their parents make. Madam President, I appreciate the tireless work of Chairman John Klein and Ranking Member Bobby Scott in the House and their staffs. But I especially want to thank my partner here in the Senate, the chairman of the Help Committee and senior senator from Tennessee, Senator Lamar Alexander. You know, the chairman had an opportunity to go down a partisan road, but instead he committed to work with me earlier this year to get this important bill done. I was very proud to work with him and many of our colleagues to break through the gridlock and keep this bill moving forward. Together, we passed our bill through the Help Committee with strong bipartisan support. We passed our bill in the Senate with strong bipartisan support. We got approval from our bicameral conference committee with strong bipartisan support. Last week, the House passed this final legislation with strong bipartisan support, and today, I hope our colleagues will approve this final bill with the same bipartisan spirit that has guided this progress this far. Now, nearly everyone agrees that No Child Left Behind is badly broken. I have heard from parent after parent, teacher after teacher, about how the law overemphasized testing and how oftentimes those tests are redundant or unnecessary. And I've seen firsthand how this law is not working for my home state of Washington. No Child Left Behind issued one-size-fits-all mandates, but then failed to give the schools the resources they needed to meet those standards. And these mandates were so unworkable that Obama administration began giving states waivers from the law's requirements. But my state lost its waiver this year. Parents across the state got a letter in the mail saying their child's school was failing. And teachers were left working as hard as ever, knowing their failing label didn't reflect the reality in their classroom. A few months ago, I heard from a teacher in Seattle named Lyon Terry. He has taught school now for more than 17 years and pours his energy into engaging with his students. He starts the morning by playing songs on his guitar. He keeps his students laughing with jokes. And every day, he tries to create an environment where kids want to come to school. But despite Mr. Terry and his fellow teachers' hard work, his school was labeled as failing. That's not fair to teachers like Mr. Terry. It is not fair to the parents who need confidence in the education their kids get at public schools, and it is not fair to students who should never have to bear the consequences of this broken law. Fixing No Child Left Behind has been one of my top priorities for students, families, and communities back home in Washington State and across the country. Madam President, back in January, we didn't know if there would be a path to compromise to reauthorize the nation's K-12 law. But I started out with several principles and Washington State priorities I'd be fighting for. First, I knew we needed to make sure schools and states provide a quality education to all their students, because we already know what happens when we don't hold them accountable for every child. Inevitably, it's the kids from low-income neighborhoods or kids of color or kids with disabilities or kids learning English who too often fall through the cracks. I said back in January, and I'll repeat, true accountability means holding up our schools to our nation's promise of equality and justice. Madam President, I knew we had to give schools and teachers the resources they need so they can help their students reach their full potential. Because in some schools, students simply don't have the same opportunity to graduate, ready for college and careers in the 21st century economy like other students do. And I knew we should only pass an education bill that would help expand access to early childhood education. Because giving more students the chance to start kindergarten ready to learn is one of the smartest investments our country can make. I'm proud to report that our bill, the Every Student Succeed Act, takes major strides on those priorities and much more. The Every Student Succeeds Act will put an end to the one-size-fits-all mandates of No Child Left Behind. It will end the era of state waivers. That will give teachers and parents in my state of Washington and across the country some much-needed certainty. Our bipartisan bill will reduce reliance on high-stakes testing so teachers and students can spend less time on test prep and more time on learning. I know that's going to be a major relief for teachers and principals like high school principal Lori Borney in Spokane, Washington. She told me she wants to see some common sense policies for testing. That's what our bill will help to do. Madam President, while Every Student Succeed Act gives states more flexibility, it also includes strong federal guardrails to hold schools and states accountable. Our bill will make sure that schools work to close achievement gaps that too often hurt kids from low-income backgrounds or students of color or those learning English or those with disabilities. And for schools that struggle the most to help students succeed, and for high schools where more than a third of their students fail to earn a diploma, our bill will ensure that they do take steps to improve. Madam President, a couple weeks ago, I met a parent named Duncan. He has a son in second grade in the Highland Public Schools, and Duncan is active in their PTA. Many of the kids in his school district struggle with poverty. Duncan said that he has seen firsthand how in districts like his, quote, every dollar matters. In the Every Student Succeeds Act, I fought hard to make sure federal resources go to the schools and districts that need them the most by rejecting a proposal known as portability. Because if enacted, portability would have siphoned off money from schools with the highest concentration of students in poverty and would send it to more affluent schools. Our bill protects students who attend schools in low-income areas and upholds our responsibility to invest federal resources where they are needed the most. Even still, many schools and districts don't get equal access to the resources they need to help students learn and grow and thrive. These are things like offering AP classes, or how much funding districts spend on each student, or access to preschool or more. So our bill will require all schools to report on those issues to help shine a light on resource inequality. And Madam President, our bipartisan bill will help improve and expand access to preschool programs. You know, before I ever thought about running for elected office, I taught preschool in a small community in my home state of Washington. I remember the first day with new students would always start the same way. Some kids wouldn't know how to hold a pencil or a crayon, or how to turn a page in a book. But over the first few months, they start to catch on. They learned how to listen at story time. They learned how to stand in line before recess. And by the time they left for kindergarten, they had those basic skills and many more, so they were ready to tackle a full curriculum in school. I have seen firsthand the kind of transformation that early learning can inspire in a child, and I'm so glad that for the first time, our nation's primary education law will invest in early childhood education. I fought hard for this because I know that investing now in preschool will pay off for years to come. Madam President, strong federal guardrails for accountability, shining a light on resource inequities, reducing the reliance on high-stake testing, and increasing access to preschool are some of the great things in this bill. But almost as but on an issue as important as education, on a law as broken as No Child Left Behind, we worked together and found a way to find common ground. It's not the bill I would have written on my own. I know it isn't the bill that Republicans would have written on their own. It's the nature of compromise. But we put partisanship aside and proved that Congress can get results for the American people. And that kind of bipartisanship is what we need more of here in Congress. With the legislative process for this bill coming to an end, I'm looking ahead to the future, when all students have the chance to learn and we strengthen our workforce. Our nation grows stronger. Our economy grows from the middle out, not from the top down. And we empower the next generation of Americans to lead the world. So as proud as I am that we've come this far on the Every Student Succeeds Act, we've always got to keep improving educational opportunities. I'm going to see to it that this bill is implemented effectively, that schools and teachers get the resources they need, that students have access to the programs that help them succeed in the classroom and beyond. I'm going to keep pushing to build on the progress we've made in this bill and make sure more students start school on a strong footing. And I'm going to keep fighting to make college more affordable and reduce the crushing burden of student debt. And I'm going to keep working every single day to make sure our government is doing everything possible to help students in Washington State and across the country. Reauthorizing ESA isn't the finish line. For me, it's more of a milestone in an ongoing commitment to swing open more doors of opportunity for Americans. And I'm asking all of my colleagues here today to join me. Let us fix this No Child Left Behind law. Let's show teachers and principals we are on their side. And let's help instill educational opportunity as our first national goal and grow our nation stronger for generations to come. Madam President, in a few minutes, as the chairman said, we will be voting on cloture to end debate so that we can move to passage of this bill. Along with him, I thank all of our staffs, and when we get to the final bill, I want to name them personally as well. They have put in an incredible amount of time and work and hours to help us to get to this agreement. So again, I want to thank all of our staffs on both sides of the aisle and in the House. I will say more about that later, but I truly want to thank Chairman Alexander for taking the time to be thoughtful and to work with us and to find a path forward for compromise on a law that was broken, that needed to be fixed, that we are about to pass. Thank you, Madam President. I yield the floor.